How did you know I would get to Vandal in time? She asked. Because you always do. You should have given me more warning. I thought your saints would appreciate the challenge. For a while she said nothing, then from somewhere behind him, he heard her. Men mock the gods until they need them, Kaz. He didn't see her go, only sensed her absence. Kaz gave an irritated shake to his head. He said he trusted Nej would be. To say he trusted Nej would be stretching the point, but he could admit to himself that he'd come to rely on her. It had been a gut decision to pay off her indentures with the menagerie, and it had cost the dregs sorely. Per Haskell had needed convincing, but Nej was one of the best investments Kaz had ever made. That she was so very good at remaining unseen made her an excellent thief of secrets, the best in the barrel, but the fact that she could simply erase herself bothered him. She didn't even have a scent. All people carried scents, and those scents told stories. The hint of carbolic on a woman's fingers, or wood smoke in her hair, the wet wool of a man's suit, or the tinge of gunpowder lingering in a shirt's cuffs. But not Nej. She somehow mastered invisibility. She was a valuable asset, so why couldn't she just do her job and spare him her moods? Suddenly, Kaz knew he wasn't alone. He paused, listening. He'd cut through a tight alley split by a murky canal. There were no street lamps here. A little foot traffic. Nothing but the bright moon and the small boats bumping against their moorings. He dropped his guard, let his mind give in to distraction. A man's dark shape appeared in the head of the alley. What business? Kaz asked. The shape lunged at him. Kaz swung his cane in a low arc. It should have made direct contact with the attacker's legs, but instead it sailed through the empty space. Kaz stumbled, thrown off balance by the force of his swing. Then somehow the man was standing right in front of him. A fist connected with Kaz's jaw. Kaz shook off the stars that rocked through his head. He spun back around and swung again, but no one was there. The weighted head of Kaz's walking stick whooshed through nothing and cracked against the wall. Kaz felt the cane torn from his hands by someone on his right. Was there more than one of them? And then a man stepped through the wall. Kaz's mind stuttered and reeled, trying to explain what he was seeing, as a cluster of mist became a cloak, boots, and the pale flash of a face. Ghosts, Kaz thought. A boy's fear, but it came with absolute surety. Geordie had come for his vengeance at last. It's time to pay your debts. You never get something for nothing. The thought passed through Kaz's mind in a humiliating, gibbering wave of panic. Then the phantom was upon him, and he felt the sharp jab of a needle in his neck. A ghost with a syringe? Fool, he thought, and then he was in the dark. Kaz woke to a sharp scent of ammonia. His head jerked back as he returned fully to consciousness. The old man in front of him wore the robes of a university medic. He had a bottle of wolf salts in his hand and was waving beneath Kaz's nose. The stench was nearly unbearable. Get away from me, Kaz rasped. The medic eyed him dispassionately, returning the wolf salts to their leather pouch. Kaz flexed his fingers, but that was all he could do. He'd been shackled to a chair with his arms behind his back. Whatever they had injected him with had left him groggy. The medic moved aside, and Kaz blinked twice, trying to clear his vision and make sense of the absurd luxury of his surroundings. He'd expected to wake in a den with the Black Tips or some other rival gang, but this wasn't Sheep Barrel Flash. A squat decked out like this took real money. Mahogany panels danced with carvings of frothing waves and flying fish, shelves lined with books, lighted windows, and he was fairly sure that was a real De Capel. One of those demure oil paintings of a lady with a book open in her lap and a lamb laying on her feet. The man observing from behind a broad desk had a prosperous look of a mercer. But if this was his house, then why were there armed members of the Stadwash guarding the door? Damn it, Kaz thought. Am I under arrest? If so, this mercer was in for a surprise. Thanks to Inej, he had information on every judge, bailiff, and high councilman in Kerch. He bared his cell before sunrise. Except, he wasn't in a cell. He was chained to a chair. So what the hell was going on? The man was in his 40s with a gaunt but handsome face, and a hairline making determined retreat from his forehead. When Kaz met his gaze, the man cleared his throat and pressed his fingers together. Mr. Brecker, I hope you're not feeling too poorly. Get this old cranker away from me. I feel fine. The merch gave a nod to the medic. You may go. Please send me your bill, and I would, of course, appreciate your discretion in this matter. The medic secured his bag and exited the room. As he did, the merchant rose and panicked and picked up a sheaf of papers from his desk. He wore the perfectly cut frock coat and vest of all Kerch merchants, dark, refined, deliberately stained. But the pocket watch and tie pin told Kaz he needed to know. All he needed to know. Heavy links of laurel leaves make up the watch's gold fob, and the pin was a massive, perfect ruby. I'm gonna pry that fat jewel from its setting and jab the pin right through your merchant neck for chaining me to a chair, Kaz thought. But all he said was, Van Eck. The man nodded. No bow, of course. Merchants didn't bow to scum from the barrel. You know me, then. Kaz knew the symbols and jewels of all Kerch merchant houses. Van Eck's crest was the red laurel. It didn't make a professor to make a connection. I know you, he said. You're one of those merch crusaders always trying to clean up the barrel. Van Eck gave another small nod. I try to find men honest work. Kaz laughed. What's the difference between wagering at the Crow Club and speculating on the floor of the exchange? One is theft, and the other is commerce. When a man loses his money, he may have trouble telling them apart. The barrel is a den of filth, vice, violence. How many of the ships you send sailing out of the Ketterdam harbors ever return? That doesn't. 1 out of 5, Van Eck. 1 out of every 5 vessels you send seeking coffee and yurta and bolts of silk skins to the bottom of the sea. Sinks to the bottom of the sea. Crashes on the rocks, falls prey to pirates. 1 out of 5 crews dead, their bodies lost to foreign waters. Food for deep-sea fishers. Let's not speak violence. I won't argue ethics with a stripling from the barrel. Kaz didn't really expect him to. He was just stalling for time as he tested the tightness of the cuffs around his wrists. He let his fingers feel along the length of the chain as far as they were able, still puzzling over where Van Eck had brought him. Though Kaz had never met the man himself, he had cause to learn the layout of Van Eck's house inside and out. Wherever they were, it wasn't the merchant's mansion. Since you didn't bring me here to philosophize, what business? It was the question spoken at the opening of any meeting, a greeting from a peer, not a plea from a prisoner. I have a proposition for you. Rather, the council does. Kaz hid his surprise. Does the merchant council bring all negotiations with the beating? Consider it a warning, and a demonstration. Kaz remembered the shape from the alley, the way that it appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Geordie. He gave himself an internal shake. Not Geordie, Podge. Focus. They nabbed him because he'd been flush off a victory and distracted. This was his punishment, and it wasn't a mistake he'd make again. That doesn't explain the phantom. For now, he pushed that thought aside. What possible use would the merchant council have for me? Van Eck thumbed through the papers in his hands. You were first arrested at 10, he said, scanning the page. Everyone remembers his first time. Twice again that year, twice at 11. You were picked up with the stad watch, roused at a gambling hall when you were 14, but you haven't served any time since. It was true. No one had managed to pinch on Kaz in 3 years. I cleaned up, Kaz said. Found honest work. Live a life of industry and prayer. Don't blaspheme, Van Eck said mildly, but his eyes flashed briefly with anger. A man of faith, Kaz noted, as his mind sorted through everything he knew about Van Eck. Prosperous, pious, a widower recently remarried to a bride not much older than Kaz himself. And of course, there was the mystery of Van Eck's son. Van Eck continued paging through the files. You run a book on prize fights, horses, and your own games of chance. You've been floor boss at the Crow Club for more than 2 years. You're the youngest to ever run a betting shop, and you've doubled his profits in that time. You're a blackmailer. I broker information. A con artist. I create opportunity. A bawd and a murderer. I don't run whores, and I kill for a cause. And what cause is that? Same as yours, Mersch. Profit. How do you get your information, Mr. Brecker? You might say I'm a lockpick. You must be a very gifted one. I am indeed. Kaz leaned back slightly. You see, every man is a safe. A vault of secrets and longings. Now there are those who take the brute's way, but I prefer a gentler approach. The right pressure applied at the right moment in the right place. It's a delicate thing. Do you always speak in metaphors, Mr. Brecker? Kaz smiled. It's not a metaphor. He was out of his chair before his chains hit the ground. He leapt the desk and snatched a letter opener from its surface in one hand, and catching hold of the front of Van Eck's shirt with the other,